Yeah, could you?
Thing up there. And then we have.
Oh, he's Brian.
Right.
Morning, everybody.
Right here.
Then we have 8 new members of the task force, or not. We have 8 new members of the task force under the legislation.
Oh, we do? I haven't read the legislation yet.
And obviously, since it's not signed,
Higher ed.
higher ed, 2 from each of the, 1 from each of the 4 chairs and ranking members of the education committee. And then ones we already knew about, the advisory group. Oh, and schools.
That's it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Your job is gonna have to be to try to get the people appointed. That's always a challenge sometimes.
But it certainly is. I mean, this task force was created 2 sessions ago, and appointments were not really made.
And trying to get those appointments made, incredibly. But, I mean, I was appointed months after, Andy.
Yeah, I did all the work. I didn't have break. And she's making up for it now.
Yeah. Ribbon committee too.
How you doing?
Yeah. You want to begin?
How about the Red Sox coming back?
Well,
I'm winning.
it's always nice to beat the Yankees. Gives us something to celebrate when we're in last place, I guess. But last night was not so good. But you know, I mean, some of my best friends are Yankees. You know,
Right. And you only think someone less of them because of that.
Not sure. I'll see what's on here.
And most important, Commissioner, are you singing it all then?
Maybe now that session is over, I can sing. Not as much as I should be, Andy. That's serious.
Did you sing with the group or
I know, it's solo.
you are?
At your church and
Yeah, I sing everywhere. I did, for my recordings, I did have backup singers, but for some of you that don't know this, but
You have recordings? Are they available on like Spotify?
yeah, I sing it every day.
it's wonderful. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Our next all staff meeting is gonna have a different.
I was trying.
Opening.
Some of them
Yeah.
with you and Jeff Curry. Jeff's also a singer.
Oh, is he?
Oh, yeah, he sings in the Greater Hartford Men's Choir,
Oh,
of course, and he's like a soloist there.
Oh, I didn't know
Oh, he is out there.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a great event to have?
Both hands and sing Kumbaya. Maybe I'll get in preparation for the next session.
Don't even mention that next session.
Literally and figuratively.
Actually, I'm surprised to even see you here. I thought you'd be still.
Thought I'd be on vacation.
Yeah. Or sleeping.
Next week.
Yeah. So should we begin in?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to begin because we're very conscious of the timelines and we have the commissioner with us today. And I know all of us have many commitments, but her commitments are unbelievable. So I want to honor her time and honor all of our time. And I just want to welcome you back to the task force and welcome those who are online. I made some really good fruit salad and quiche and a few things. If I could give it to you online, I would. So, but we're happy to have you with us. And I just want to reiterate again that we want this task force to be very, I want to say different, because many times, as we've said in the beginning, what the legislature does is if they can't solve something, they turn it into a task force, which many times doesn't go anywhere. And I'm being very frank about this, and I know it's being recorded, but so it's okay. I just really feel strongly that this task force and the time you're giving is going to be a different kind of task force, and we're going to make significant but realistic recommendations when the task force is finished. And the legislature did update and change some of the parameters of the task force. They've made it a later date. They've added people and they've added responsibilities to us, of course. So, and Andy will talk about that to an extent. I have been very pleased with the progress we're making so far. We certainly have looked at a lot of data, and I've gained a whole lot of understanding. One of the things that I keep sharing with everybody who will listen is your special ed numbers and your percentages of increase, et cetera, are directly tied to the quality of general education. And I keep saying that to everyone around tier 1 instruction. And I am certainly hoping that we can make those correlations as we move forward, especially in the area of reading. When you look at the percent of LD students. So I think we all know each other, and we do have Louis Rosado Birch here with us from CEA today. And I, at this point, would like to turn it over to Andy for his words.
Whatever, friends. But among other things that we were additionally assigned in numerous instances of the legislation was dealing with gifted and talented. And so that's another area that we really do need to focus on. You know, back in the old days, gifted and talented was part of special education. That was changed. And I do think that's, you know, an important area. We're also supposed to look at observations, supposed to look at seclusion. We're supposed to look at how long the developmental disability label can be given, how it's going until what age. So there's lots of stuff in the legislature specifically asking us to look at together with all the general issues, especially. So we've got a lot to do, and I am unwilling to sit around and admire the problems. Talk about how we actually can.
And I know that we absolutely will, and I'm thrilled to have, we're all thrilled to have the commissioner with us today. I think it speaks to the importance of this task force. And she was recently in Washington and testified before the Senate on the mental health of students and what we are doing in Connecticut. I read her testimony and report, which was quite lengthy and quite detailed. And I was very proud of the work we're doing in Connecticut on that. And I can't think of a better spokesperson for us. So with that, I'll turn it over to the commissioner.
Thank you so much, Fran. Good morning, all of you, those in the room and those joining virtually as well. And appreciate your kind words, Fran. And please know, I think if you got to page 16 of my testimony, the last paragraph was basically how we work together in Connecticut. Doesn't mean we always agree on everything, and that's healthy. But the fact that we're always in the same space, really working together to solve these issues, and it sets us apart. And that's why I was able to talk about these kinds of things, because we're actually seeing an impact for working together. So I just thank all of you. Our cheers here, certainly Fran and Andy are well known to me. We've had a very long relationship over many, many years. And so not coming into the room as a stranger, but appreciate the fact for all of you and your different organizations that we do this work together. And that really, that was the message that I was saying, although it was a mental health issue for young people that I was talking about, I was honored. This was my second time testifying. I testified a year ago on education recovery, and the same message about all of us working together, all the partners working together. So was that same message as well. So this task force, and I appreciate what both Fran and Andy said about this is not admiring the problem. We've got to solve this. And it is getting in the room together and putting all our expertise in the same space. And I know Brian is here. I appreciate Brian and all the work of the staff in the agency, and want to introduce to you a new addition to our staff, and she's on screen, who is our Deputy Commissioner. You can wave at us. Is our Deputy Commissioner for Educational Supports and Wellness and Special Education in our organizational structure, will be directly under her preview, and is Deputy Commissioner Cynthia Soni Moyano, who has joined us and I wanted her to be in the space this morning, as you may be seeing her face joining Brian. And I'll just give you a moment to add your voice to the room, Cynthia. I don't know if is she able to unmute, or does somebody have to unmute her? Oh, she can.
Good morning, everyone. And I thank you for welcoming me into your space this morning. I'm looking forward to collaborating with all of you and bringing my expertise of 20 plus year in education, and have worked as a teacher, as well as the other levels of administration, just coming out of literally a building a few weeks ago, which is Manchester, Connecticut. So, rolling up my sleeves and ready to get to work. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So she's joining, and as I said, you'll be able to see her face in different spaces, but also being a good backup here with Brian. The other thing I should say as well, and appreciate, I know Brian is doing a presentation today, because in solving any issues, the first thing we have to know is what is. Too many times, and we've all experienced it, folks are having lots of conversations, and some of the things that are being discussed are already solved, and some of them are not really going to get you there. Now, my question, if you heard me talking to our legislators a lot, is what is the problem you're trying to solve? You've got to be able to understand that completely to make sure that the solutions are really targeted to get you where you want to go. So appreciate whatever we can do in providing information, and just continue to be thought partners around this work is really important for us to get to the impact that we're all working on together. I am making sure that everyone in Connecticut understands when we talk about our students, that they know who they are. And I've done it. I did it in my testimony. I was at a gala event the other night, and I was there talking to them about 513,513 students in our state, and making sure people understand. And I say this all the time, that over 88,000 of them are students with disabilities, or we call varying abilities. That's a number that I hold, we can say 17.2%. Nobody needs to do high math here. Right on the ground, over 88,000 students. And that number, Brian can tell you, has been growing. Fran talked about it. But every single one of those students, they have a name, and they are a part of our system. And everything we do is in service of improving services for them. And I know that's a part of your charge, with more added. Talking about services, talking about funding, which I also talked to the feds about funding special education, the promise that was made, promise unfulfilled. Maybe we can all get that message as well as we talk to our congressional delegation. And so making sure we're improving educational outcomes for all of our students, really important. And today we're really talking about this particular population of students. Brian has a full presentation, but a couple of things I wanted to just mention up front. If you have not yet heard, soon to be released and announced and launched is our call center. And Brian can tell you more, but it will be a call center available. It's a great partnership with CPAC. and the Department of Education, being able to have parents, be able, and the community in general, have a number to call, and to have folks who are trained to answer questions and to provide direction. I know Brian's group gets a lot of call. I get letters, but we'll have a space for folks to be able to call in. And so we'll be blasting that number out, and Brian can tell you all more about it as to where we go from that. But I did want folks to know that that is indeed occurring. The issue of staffing is one that is a concern for us. And oh, by the way, we recognize that even though we've got great pieces of legislation, we can't always legislate ourselves out of some of the issues that are there. They literally need boots on the ground. We were talking before we started that we saw that there are proposals to add capacity to our agency. We're still trying to unpack that because I'm not sure they gave us the money to do it. So it's great to have it in legislation to say thou shalt hire X, Y, Z, but we also need to be able to fund it. So we'll let you know how we came out on that. But it's staffing in our staffing capacity, but it's also staffing in the districts. And we know that has been a thorny issue. We've not shoved that under the rug. We have the data to show about the 1,300 paraeducator vacancies that we have, close to that for educators. And we know the disproportionate numbers are those in special education. And so we're continuing to see what we can do at the state agency level. We ask for your thoughts, your ideas. At the end of the month, we're having a joint fair with the DOL, the Department of Labor, I think it's Quinnipiac that we're doing that. So please help us spread the word. Naugatuck Community College. And so we're going to be there. I think 17 or 18 districts already signed up to be there, but we need people there, right? We need those who are interested in being paraeducators to be there. So help us to spread the word. A friend will probably get you the flyer so you can get it out through your networks. So anyway, I know it's a small piece but it just shows that we're truly working very hard to do as much as we can to attract folks so that they can be in the spaces to support our students. So that really is important. Brian will tell you about the funding that we've allocated out of the COVID relief dollars at the state agency level. We had state agencies set aside funds. Out of ESSER 2, we designated $16 million that we got out. There's another $6 million that I know we're working on, and probably more in the pipeline. It doesn't fix the funding issues permanently, as we know, but at least it shows our commitment to making sure that we can provide as much support as we can. Stipends, we won't talk much about CT sets, but it is here. We recognize the challenges around that. I have a meeting today with the CEO of PCG. It is that important that we're having that conversation at the highest levels to make sure that we're providing the support and addressing that issue. So I just really wanted to put that in the room to let you know where we are. Brian would be providing a lot more details, but thank you for what you're doing and for what you're going to do. We look forward to the recommendations that you have, how we can support those, how we can make sure that we have the most impact as we can from this group. So I'm looking for no pressure, but looking for great things out of this group as you grapple with all the things that we have to do. But this population of students deserve no less than for all of us to be working together on their behalf. So with that, I thank you very much, and I won't take any more time from Brian. And if there are questions, we can do that, I don't know, at the end. I know I won't be able to spend the entire time with you. We have a board meeting tomorrow, which means I'm gonna get back and get ready for that. But I'll stop there, Brandon.
Thank you so much.
Can I-
Thank you, Commissioner.
What's your sense about why it's so difficult to attract, hire, and retain special ed teachers?
Oh, wow. I think that is truly a loaded question. I think this is a part of the bigger issue, I think, on teaching in general. And a part of the issue is making sure, I know we talk about folks are respected and they see career pathways in this profession. And I think we have to continue to do that. How many times you've talked to people who said, well, I wouldn't want to encourage my kids to get into teaching. And why is that? I think we have to unpack and understand why those things are indeed the case. But I think we've got to make sure that this is really attractive. And in the midst of that, Andy, I can share with you that our Ed Rising program, where we have, these young people out there, I get a lot of excitement from them. They see teaching as a social justice issue. that they want to make sure that they're in that space. And there's a lot of excitement. And so if we can continue to encourage, as we're growing our own and encourage a population of students to say, here's where you can do a lot of great things and a lot of good and supported students, I think that would be good for all of us. But I think we all need to be on message about the value of educators in our classrooms and what you're able to do. That's important. So we continue, and where we're hearing that there's negativity, how can we, right, together on message, change that kind of mindset? I think it's really important. Brian may have some other thoughts about special education.
We all have thoughts about that.
Yeah.
I'd want to get your take on that. And we will spend a lot of time discussing that.
The funding piece, we talked about, is a part of it as well, but we also know that in any profession, compensation is really important and we shouldn't downgrade that. But the climate in which you work, the value for what you do is also sometimes, people will tell you it's not the money, right? Which is important. It's not, and I know I'm not saying it shouldn't be about the money, but the value of what you do, I think is really important.
I couldn't agree more. Doing exit interviews, I say it all the time. The working conditions, people want to feel successful. And if they're not working in conditions where they can feel successful, they'll leave you. And many of our challenge districts are there. And I couldn't agree more, Commissioner, on the whole idea of respect for the profession, respect and love, and understanding that this is a calling to, yes, it's for social justice, I agree. And I don't think we're saying that loud enough and often enough as a state. And I would love to see, we love nothing more. I mean, CA has done a great job of campaigns and having it on TV and everything else. But I think it should be broader than that. I think it should be from the governor on down that there is a year-long respect campaign for the profession, because I do think that's a big issue with it. And you just hear it over and over again. No, I'm not gonna have my kids doing that. You know what I mean? And yet, no profession could be better. So, anyway.
And I'll just add that a part of respect is making sure our educators' voices are heard. Because too many times they're being told what they should do from folks who don't understand what it means to do the work.
Now, in this field, everybody's an expert in education.
Right.
Because I went to school.
Yeah, and so there's a big part of that. We're not valuing the voices and the training that is there. So everyone have their thoughts and ideas. I think it was Fred who said, how many people go to their doctors and tell them what it is that they should be doing? Other professions, but it's so easy. And the fact that during the pandemic, everybody got into that space, right? Everybody saw it, everybody got into that space. And so I think there is still that piece there that we need to be able to work through.
Well, it's too bad we didn't leverage that, because there was a lot of renewed respect for teachers during the pandemic, and we did not capitalize on that in the way we should have. I mean, that's regret at this point, but that's
But we're moving forward, right? And so we can learn what is those things that we need to recapture. And as Fran said, I know Eric is here, the campaign around, enticing folks into the profession and making sure that we can tell those positive stories and messages. That's the other piece we don't often sometimes put out there. Again, and we're not trying to cover the fact that we've got challenges, but when we see positive things and things that are happening, we ought to make sure that we're talking about those as well and making sure people know that it's happening in our districts.
The social media campaign is just so powerful and really connects with the younger generation, right? Just as an example, I clicked on my Instagram account, teacher account, Instagram account. Instantaneously, ads started popping up for leaving the teaching. Just as I clicked on, follow teachers and some fun stories and that kind of thing, how to leave the profession. Hire me as your career coach. You don't have to stay in teaching. And so that's what glares at me every time I put on.
Wow. Wow.
So I think you're so right about putting those positive stories out there.
And I think fixing salary, I'm not saying we shouldn't work on salary. I absolutely believe that. I absolutely believe we should work on working conditions, but I think the foundation is that respect and, you know, not only for new people coming in, but for those who have labored there for a very long time.
This is Susan Yankee, Commissioner. Hi.
Hi.
I recently, I actually last night, I went over the website for the Connecticut Teacher of the Year. I had to go back as far as 2010 to find anyone with any special education experience, and they were still general ed. There is a paraeducator Teacher of the Year. Is there any consideration for a special education Teacher of the Year? Sort of a recognition to say you're valued? I didn't know if your office had given any thought to that.
So thank you for your question. Always, we work very closely with the Teacher of the Year Council in the state for the Teacher of the Year and also the Connecting Paraeducator of the Year. Something for us to think about. Is there other ways as we think in general about how we amplify, lift up, raise up? Are those the kinds of things that we should be thinking about as well? So I certainly will take that back to our team as we think about that as well. How do we, for this population of educators, is there anything that we can do to further amplify the work and the efforts? So thank you.
I think it's a really good point. Because I do think the job of a special educator is really different than the job of a general education teacher. In so many ways. And I'm not sure we should really be encouraging the division of the profession in that way, but it is the case. I mean, I say, you know, I teach at Central, and you know, a lot of the special education teachers say I'm a special educator because I get to teach rather than just deliver a curriculum as a general education teacher does. And I get to use teachable moments. I get to try different techniques with kids. So it is a different sort of approach to teaching.
And I learned a lot in just a couple of task force meetings that, you know, I've always, for whatever reason, for many reasons, have held special ed staff in very high esteem. You know, I felt that they were well trained and knew things that I didn't know as a classroom teacher or administrator. And yet I'm hearing from this task force that that's not the case everywhere for special ed teachers. And so I think that's something that we really have to be aware of too. You know, some people think because the caseload is smaller and classroom teacher that, well, what are these people doing? Do you know what I mean? And I think we really need to educate people on that as well.
Awesome. Thank
Thank you very much for being with us.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'll listen to some of Brian's presentation further now.
Okay, good.
Well,
All right.
And looking at this presentation, we better be ordering you dinner.
I tend to go a little overboard, you know, it's sharing, but just high touch. We should
Okay.
always do. I'm not sure if someone online will be projecting or
Dawn?
is that for folks on
The
screen?
person sitting in for Rosalie, just let them know which one to put on.
It's her.
Yeah,
I will be projecting.
Oh, thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, it's the PowerPoint presentation for Special Education Task Force with today's date. I
Okay.
believe it's PDF. Yeah. Awesome, thank you. So, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present. I tried to put some slides together that were responsive in collaboration with the commissioner for highlighting some of the activities at the Bureau and also sharing some data with you all. And although there are a lot of slides, I don't mean to just present, so please feel free to ask questions as I go through and clarification and further information for those folks online as well. So the first slide is just a snapshot of our current Bureau of Special Education. We have 3 units in the Bureau. But the work is very collaborative, not only within, but across our departments. Our first unit is the due process unit, where those folks are tasked with overseeing complaints and mediations and due process hearings, but also proactively looking at mechanisms to train and inform our stakeholders to reduce the need to access those formal procedures within conflict resolution. We have a program improvement unit, which looks to, for everyone's collaborative and collective goal of improving outcomes for students with disabilities. And then we have a department that oversees our grants and funding in our communications to districts. I've highlighted a few of our newest members, which we're very excited. Like our school districts, we've been experiencing significant vacancies and decreased capacity over the last few years. So it's great to have new individuals coming on board and supporting the work that we do. And of course, with our deputy commissioner coming in to support our department as a whole, we're really excited about that additional leadership support for supporting all students with disabilities across.
Very, very upset that you've taken the single greatest mediator in the history of Connecticut and put it around your staff.
Oh, that's nice of you to say.
Well, it's not nice.
But no, I know you're upset.
I
Yeah,
am.
that's nice. If it was a nice compliment for Kirsten.
Well, I mean, that's
Yeah.
really, I mean, that's.
Yeah, so Kirsten Dovenberg and Jennifer James are joining our due process, and Kirsten was heavily involved with mediation and had very respect
No,
for school districts and
mediation program
attorneys
in
as well.
Connecticut is really the high point of dispute resolution in the whole special ed unit. And Kirsten is by far the best and agreed by both sides.
Perfect.
No,
Well, she'll be helping us to lead that structure moving forward, so we're excited about that additional capacity.
I'm gonna call her and ask.
So the next slide is just a very general overview of so OSIP is the Office of Special Education Programs. That's who we report to directly from a federal component. And there's just a timeline there. I won't dive into detail, but a timeline of OSIP's progression and how they monitor states' activities. And fast forward to 2022, 23, there's differentiated monitoring, which is a combination of compliance and results-based indicators. They've revamped this structure, and it's a cohort-based model of evaluating states' effectiveness. They have gone through the first cohort. It's a 3-year process. Connecticut will not engage in OSIP's direct monitoring until the 25-26 school year because we're in cohort 4. Part of that reason is because we haven't had issues at the federal level with regard to our determinations in the past. Another reason is that prior to me starting, there was an on-site monitoring not too long ago before they started this process. So we're looking forward to that structure, but Connecticut is OSIP determines states' status every year, and there are only 22 states currently that are meeting requirements, and Connecticut is one of those 22 states. And OSIP was very vocal in their back to school this year about the progress that's been made since IDEA was first implemented. However, still the amount of work and the amount of need out there that needs direct attention and focus. Looks like you have a question, Amy.
What proportion of your work in the Bureau is gathering and reporting data through the federal government?
Well, it's really, I'll say it's 100% of what we do because it's integrated. So we don't take the work for the federal government or our monitoring separately and handle it in a separate. So what I mean by that is all of our technical assistance and training and professional development is aligned with what our federal requirements are. So understanding the implementation of the IDEA as an example. But we have an amazing performance office that, we're data rich. So we're light years ahead of other states in that category, but it's just a matter of getting to the results and integrating those data and analyzing those data for outcomes is really where the work happens. So it's hard to put a percentage on it, but.
Yeah, but I think what you're getting at is that because sometimes you can be so caught up into generating the data that you're not involved in the results and the work. I think what Brian is saying is that the work really, we're gathering the data, not just by doing the data, but by doing the work that is then producing the information that we're reporting. But to the point, the actual mechanism of reporting really happens through the support of our performance office. So there's staff assigned there that's actually doing the roll-up of the data and the actual data points that's reporting to the feds.
We're lucky to have a data manager who's been in place for several years and is actually chairing the committee at the state level for other data managers. So we've been fortunate in that sense to have that experience and wealth of knowledge in that area. But it's it's a lengthy process to report.
Well,
and
that
gather
was the
data.
point I was making, is how much the feds demand.
There is quite a bit of demand, and right now there's up for public comment are additional indicators for states. They added an 18th indicator, which is around timely correction of noncompliance, which we've done historically. However, OSIP's analysis of that is that it's a zero impact budget-wise on states, which we're pushing back a bit to say there's no such thing as a zero impact because that's additional time and resources that focus in on those.
But as a committee, it's great to know this background because we had proposed legislation this past year. I don't think it passed because we had conversation with folks asking us to do a lot of these things, which we already do, that the federal government that we have to report on. So I think just the understanding of special education and the whole process of monitoring and supervision and what the feds ask states to do, I think it's really important for people to understand that.
And more importantly, for this task force, we really ought to be diving into that
Yeah,
stuff. Because that does tell the story.
Yeah, that's right.
And so historically, for our local determinations, we've used compliance indicators, and Connecticut does a really good job. There's been a tremendous amount of work to ensure compliance as it relates to the IEP and our requirements. That doesn't mean 100% of the time we're where we need to be, but that hasn't been an issue in Connecticut. So having that foundation, now the idea is to move and incorporate results-based indicators. And through our stakeholders, the directors really identified chronic absenteeism and students not attending school as a huge impact on these indicators of results when kids aren't in school, not accessing their services. So the determinations moving forward will incorporate attendance in chronic absenteeism because schools are doing such great work around re-engaging, and Connecticut's received some national attention on our LEAP program and other mechanisms to try to bring students back to school or deliver instruction in creative ways so that students have access and can make progress.
The other side of that, of course, is though that so much of this is procedural compliance. And what really matters is whether the students are getting the appropriate public education,
The substantive.
which
end of
the
that,
substantive piece, which is not easily measurable. And because of all the focus on the procedural requirements, that often I think the view is that if you meet the procedural, well, the Supreme Court said it in Raleigh, if you meet the procedural requirements, substantive requirements will follow. That is not logically true, even though the Supreme Court said it. And we've really got to be focusing on what we do about the quality of special education and frankly, closing the gap in performance over time.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, and the pandemic turned us all upside down and back again, but to see the focus on compliance throughout the pandemic, schools take pride in those compliance factors in the state and are diligent to, we didn't see a backslide in any way, shape, or form, which I think the federal government was really concerned about, is that, because we want to keep our students and our staff safe. That's the foundation. So timelines, can wait but in our state, like I said, folks take a lot of pride in those net numbers.
I just wondered, Brian, what are you seeing with all these shortages? How are they meeting the needs of these kids?
Yeah.
Because I'm not hearing a whole lot. And I'm just wondering how when I did the survey, it wasn't as complete as yours, but it was 92 districts
Mhm.
with 255 openings for special ed teachers and even more than that for paras. How are they managing to meet the demands of the IEP? Or are they?
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, they're not able to. So we do receive complaints from parents based on services not being provided and the school districts doing everything they can, their due diligence to fill those vacancies. And so what we've been vocal about is making sure that you're transparent and communicating to parents about vacancies when they do exist, keeping track of services that are missed or delayed, and then developing plans through the PPT to make those services up. Having said that, I think we've heard from task force members in this council that folks are taking on additional caseloads. Administrators are taking on creative strategies in their buildings to support in any way that they can, even administrators covering certain classes and services. So they're not pulling out all stops to make sure that students are getting what they need.
Yeah, I mean, I
But-
just think about that.
Yeah.
Often and how they, like a Waterbury with so many openings,
Yes.
how they can.
In
provide.
compensatory education is fine, but there's no end in sight to when the hours just keep increasing and the bank is empty, it becomes an unrealistic.
Right, and getting speech therapy as a 10-year-old when you need it as a 5-year-old, it's not terribly useful.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there because I think
Yeah.
it's,
And I think the situation is even worse in relationship to parents.
yeah,
Because so much of special ed delivery is done by parents, and the shortage is more acute there.
I think some of the money that you were able to move forward in the legislature for health insurance may help.
We've been having lots of conversation I meet with the folks of the paraeducators a few times, a couple months, and I constantly listen to them to hear what can we do. And they, to a person, have always said, yes, we need increased salaries, but if you can do anything for us, it's our health insurance.
Let me just say that in this legislative session, major legislative proposals, both for teachers and parents. The only thing that passed for parents was inclusion in a low level of health insurance. It's something that's not much. Very, very, very reluctant to do it, to reward teachers for what they're doing. The answer I got when I pressed the legislators on that is, just too many numbers, just too big. It's just way too much money to do anything. So spending cap. Yeah, but yeah, the money was there.
And some of and then Fran knows this with the ESSER advisors that's working with some of our northern districts. Some of the districts did do some incentives for educators out of their
Yeah.
resources that they have. And I know we're continuing for those that still have some resources that may not be realized, because a lot of our districts with large amounts of money, they budgeted for increased staffing. And we know that some of that may not be realized. And so we're continuing to encourage those that still have resources that is not going to realize that what they had planned for, to be able to look at those resources and to think about how that can be deployed in some incentive ways for incentives for educators.
But something I would really like to see data on, if you can assemble it, is the migration of teachers from underfunded districts to richer districts. I mean, we in Connecticut have pay rates set by local districts. And in fact, that's true everywhere in the country. There's no reason there's a statewide pay rate for teachers. But when I was looking at the figures, same level teacher in Hartford could get $12,000 more a year by going to Western. And I wonder how much of the teacher shortage is concentrated in the poorer districts, because richer districts bought teachers away. And is there a way to get that data? And that I'd particularly be interested in that in the special ed field, obviously, but I think more generally too.
We can share with you, there's 4 or 5 PowerPoint slides that the performance office put together. And it showed the alliance district versus non-alliance district and the approved private special education programs as well. So we can start that and share that information.
That's great.
with you. So you can.
Well, we'll just go back to your question, Andy, about the shortage and how that impacting districts, you know, as improved private. Then Haven and all of our colleagues have seen an enormous increase of referrals to our programs. We have close to 30 referrals for 3 spots that we can't fill because we don't have the staff to fill. And we get 1 to 2 referrals. We have to stay in 2 reviews. You don't have the staff. And my colleagues similar.
Well, that's another very interesting proposition, that out of district referrals are taking place because there isn't staff in public schools.
And
That is really a penny wise, pound foolish approach.
I think that's certainly part of it. I also think that kids have very complex needs coming out of the pandemic and need a greater level of support, perhaps. It's great to get.
You know, Anna mentioned too, at the advisory council that at younger ages, the
Yes.
referrals are coming in like pre-K, kindergarten.
Right,
It's not,
Right.
and there
to
are
your
private
point,
placements
of
for them.
high needs. Yeah.
There are private placements for kids that young. All right, we're on
Okay,
page
we don't
1.
wanna-
Yeah, page 1. Well, we're gonna fast forward.
He's gonna fast forward, but it's
Yeah.
also worth it just making me stop and think about some of the workforce strategies that are happening across agencies, and maybe at some point it may be worth, bringing into this council, Office of Workforce Strategies, DPH is doing some creative things as well. That's what was in my testimony, just to hear about the pipeline issue and what that may look like. So it may just inform some of you thinking around that. So maybe for another meeting, it may be worth
Yeah.
those conversations.
Well, as long as you brought up pipeline. What's the relationship of the department to the programs, teacher education in the state, and what can be done to enhance that pipeline? And as I shared before, I was talking to the head of the special ed program at Central, who told me that 5 years ago, class of 40, 39 were teachers, 1 was durational shortage. This year, class of 40, 39 are durational shortages. And that's not a good sign for a robust pipeline of special ed teachers in the future.
And so some of the resources that we've deployed, looking at staffing shortages, is also for even supporting cross endorsements and some of those kinds of things. And so, Brian, their talent office is in that space. And so any thoughts or ideas that you've got, and we can come back specifically and talk about some of those kinds of things and work with our higher ed institutions in this space. And if you've got creative solutions, we can take those on as well. So not to take your time on it, but it is all, right? That's what you're hearing. It's not just,
Right.
it's all, and across our agencies, all the areas working together in this particular space. So when we think about shortages, we're looking at all the shortage areas that we have as well, and what do we do to grow the pipeline? And, we've mentioned, I know Brian's gonna mention it later, we've done the issue of reciprocity with 11 states. We're looking to see how that's working. We have close to 500 new educators who are actually teaching in the state that came out of reciprocity, and the staff told me yesterday, more and more of them are applying. And for those that receive their ability to teach in Connecticut, not yet teaching, I'm saying, what can I do to entice them? Because they're really teacher ready here. What can we do for them? So we're continuing to do that as well.
That's good.
Yeah.
One of the exciting parts of the higher ed connection that we have too is that they have access to CT SEDS and the new IEP system. So for the first time, really, as long as we can remember back, teachers coming out will have experience and exposure to the system in the actual, writing IEPs. So that will help. We've collected feedback from all of the higher ed agencies, and it was the first year, so they just started in the spring, but having that as a foundation coming in will take a little bit of the pressure off schools and districts, at least for the initial exposure.
I can imagine student teachers coming in and being told, you fill out these forms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry to
Oh.
interrupt. This is Susan Yankee again. For our Connecticut high school students that go out of state for education and special education degrees, often when they do their student teaching, they become emotionally connected to that state that they're attending college in. Are there paid summer internships in Connecticut? I mean, how do you incentivize them to come back and teach in Connecticut?
You know, great question, and I'll start by saying one of the things that we're resourcing right now is the build of apprenticeship programs. And then the other things that we're also doing is helping to cover the cost of really taking the exams and all that. And we're beginning to do that. So I think it's a matter of making sure that it's as attractive as possible. And out of the legislation was, I think, $4 million for scholarships. So I think when you put all those together and appreciate the question, we're hoping that we can entice folks either to come here to do that or those that are here to get into that, because we hear a lot from our students about the cost of, you know, having to student teach, having to give up a job. And that's what the apprenticeship program is, that they will be paid as they're doing their student teaching and not have to worry too much about that. They'll be paid. And then with some connections to the district that will then keep them on. So we're trying to build that pipeline. So that is, I think, a positive for us to make sure that we're attracting students to get into the profession and to do all of that here in Connecticut and then to remain here.
I think the reciprocity will help a great deal with that also, because I just remember from being at the state, there were students that would get certified in other states, but would not be able to be certified here, would have to take additional courses, Susan. So I think that will help them as well, that they will automatically become certified here.
Do we have any data on average length of service teachers, whether that's declining? Length of service, you know, with all these stories about CEA puts out about how, you know, 60% of teachers are considering quitting. I'm wondering whether it's in fact true that teachers are leaving earlier than they used to. I've not seen any data on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we have that in our own data files for service, but we can query and see what's there. Sometimes I'm always surprised to see what's there.
One of the bills included some exit survey.
Yeah, there's
That's
some
right.
information that too as
But
well.
I mean, it's, you know,
Right, to understand. Of course, we try to say to folks, don't do the exit surveys. You need to do state surveys.
Right.
Yeah.
You need to find out what's going to keep you before you get to
there
that.
ought to be the same survey that Facebook uses when you try to quit Facebook. Why are you leaving? You really want to leave? You got an offer for you.
I also think that we continue, I just have to put it on the table, even if they're not exiting the state, they're exiting our districts that are most challenged. And they're moving to other districts to do their work. And I get it. And I, again, would say it's around working conditions. It's very hard to convince people truly that makes all the difference in the world, but it absolutely is what people have told me over and over again. And it's a very hard thing to work with. It really is. It's easier to add to the compensation than it is to ensure that there are enough mental health workers in the building, and that there are reading people and interventionists and small class size. It's a lot to take on, but if we don't, we're going to continue to see the exodus.
Well, but another part of that is what Karen was saying, which is that we're dealing with a much more difficult group, much more intensely inflected group of students. And that's, you know, that is a huge factor in terms of working conditions.
Yeah, I mean, there are 1,500 teachers in Bridgeport, probably a little bit less now because population has decreased. But when I was there, it was not unusual to lose 200 a year.
200 from the district or leaving the profession?
No, leaving the district, some retirees, some leaving, you know.
But of course, you had a pipeline that you could fill those slots.
Yeah,
Once
They were
that
not
that
all
was-
filled, they were not all filled though. I mean, that's.
No,
the-
they were not all
Right.
I mean, there were times when, one of our high schools, the math department was completely staffed with long-term subs. There were times that I could not offer physics, and certainly in the area of special.
There's some comments in the chat.
Yeah, there was a comment in the chat, and I think, Sonny, did you put something up? I wasn't sure. I was trying to read it from where I was.
We can't. Does somebody have access to that to read it to them?
I have to go to the back room.
Oh.
I have to go to the back room, just.
No, she said there were comments in the chat, but we weren't able to see it from us.
But I'm hearing from principals and superintendents that whereas there used to be, 100 applicants for a kindergarten, for an elementary school teacher, they're now lucky to get 3 or 4 applicants.
Right, right.
And they're not getting in the suburbs, the new teachers for interventionists anymore.
But even looking at the data, and I know you've got to move on, is the special education employment system that we have, that we placed over 400 employees in. Brian, I'm trying to query to see, were those folks who were working someplace else, or they're truly new to, you know what I'm saying, to the work? Really important for us to find out as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have to speak up, I guess.
Mhm.
Okay.
No, no, we get, go take this.
Sorry.
This is the,
I don't know if that's it or that's.
Oh, okay.
oh yeah, probably
It's
those.
fun all over the place.
Yeah, that's not even on.
That's like they read it from.
You just need to get social security and pension debt paid, right?
Talking about weapon GPO, windfall elimination, government pension offset.
Oh, okay.
Well, that was a decision made many years ago, and,
At another level, yeah.
well, and the teachers, got more pay in the moment and less in the future.
Right, you're gonna really have dinner if you. Brian,
Go on, Brian, move on. Where are you so slow, Brian?
No, great discussions. So, well, if we could fast forward to the next 2 slides, we'll transition a little bit to talk about funding. Yeah, perfect. So the commissioner mentioned the $16 million investment that was made in the emergency funding. This is just a summary for you all, not to go into too much depth, but we really targeted that concept of recovery for school districts to provide additional stipends, depending on the size of the district, or any services that were either delayed or interrupted or suspended, inaccessible for our students with IEPs. The second bucket of work was around tutoring, which is still moving forward and happening where students are provided tutoring. We did target the dyslexia population for this particular stipend for students that were identified as specific learning disability dyslexia to receive services and tutoring. And then special education evaluations, we talked at a previous meeting. So this is just a visual for the really great work that the RESC Alliance did to support districts and alleviate some of those evaluation responsibilities, assessments, and conducting those assessments. And we also have a really wonderful partnership with the Department of Developmental Services. Initially, it was to provide support in the students' homes so that they can access virtual instruction. That then expanded over time throughout the pandemic and includes activities outside of the home, for example, accessing summer programming and for those high needs population students.
And I just want to put these numbers in context. This state of Connecticut spends approximately $4 billion a year on teaching special education. And so these are, very good programs, but it's the size that make it to have a real impact. It's huge program.
Yeah, it's amazing though to see the applications of the districts and how they make a small, what you would consider a small sum or stipend go a long way. We were really impressed with the creative and solutions that the districts did put in place to be able to make an impact. But certainly it's a great point about the overall context of funding in general.
And it's also good, and I'm sure you'll have that, the list of what each district receives in
Yeah.
even the IDEA funding is a good list to have if you don't already have that information. Because when we think about not all, I always say not all districts are funded equally, right, around that, even though it's maybe allocation. So it's always good to get a sense. Some of our districts, when they get a grant for $100,000, they get $1 million
Mhm.
based on size and scope and what they do. So
That's
I'm
right.
always thinking about how do we support even some of our smaller districts? And we have some grant programs right now that we're saying are for those that receive less than $15 million in COVID relief funds, because they struggle very much to do any extra effort, make any extra effort just because of the resources that they have.
But of course, in a year, every single district is gonna be under $15 million in COVID relief. They're all gonna get zero.
Well, we continue to have those conversations, and a part of testifying with our congressional delegation. Those are some of the questions, frankly, that senators were asking about. The current funding and what should they be looking at going forward. My message to them is we need to know where the results are so that you can fund what works. And it's so because folks don't want to just throw money out there to say, we're giving you money, what are you doing with it? And what is the impact that you're receiving? So I think that conversation should be continuing. I think message from all of us.
Well, I just want to comment on that briefly. I'm sorry. We have a tendency to reward high performing districts and punish low performing districts, whereas it seems to me we probably should be doing exactly the opposite. It's the low performing districts that need the help. And that's where money should be going. Resources should be going to them. With a lot of support, and the Alliance program tends to provide some level of support, right?
Well, it's worth, we have it online now, the resources that's going into districts. I think it's worth taking a look at it.
Yeah.
And especially some of you've mentioned those needing the most support. There are resources there. Part of our work is ensuring impact, right? And that we're supporting our district and making sure that those resources are being impactful.
So let me just ask,
Yes.
districts received an additional money for tutoring
Yes,
after or during COVID or
this was the summer right after, where we had allocated the recovery funds.
2021?
Yeah, so based on the size of the districts.
Yeah.
They received, increasing amounts of money. And then we ran numbers of the students with dyslexia, the counts. And there was $600 allocated to each student that was identified with dyslexia. So if your district had 10 students, you received $6,000. So it was a small amount, but again, those individual students were able to access additional tutoring over the summer.
Within another week or so, we put out a new grant for high dose tutoring in math
Yeah.
specifically.
Okay.
So the next slide depicts just the continuation, as the commissioner mentioned, the additional ESSER 3 or ARP ESSER funds related to special education, a continuation of special education recovery. We also had a focus on paraeducator professional development. Again, smaller amounts of stipends, but allowing the districts to allocate specifically those funds to build the capacity of their non-certified staff.
And these is out of the 10% that went to the state.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all of this is.
The
This is
90%
state
went to
exempt.
districts. That's right.
90% went directly to district, 10% as state set aside. So these are additional ways that we've allocated our 10, right?
Exactly.
Our 10%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The assistive technology column there, we're excited about regional hubs that are going to be provided for districts. It's a collaborative effort with the RESC Alliance, CERC, and New England Assistive Technology Network Marketplace. So that is moving forward, and those services that will provide technical assistance and consult for students who need access around assistive technology. There's the early childhood connection there with our consultation. We heard of the higher increasing needs of students at the younger levels, so being able to provide some additional resources in that context. And then finally, the investment around recruiting for special education. The Connecticut Special Education Employment System was added to our job posting options for school districts, and we've seen some Again, it's not a end all for the staffing crisis that we have, but it has provided some support. And Karen, to your point about social media, over 70% of folks access that site through social media, clicking on, not necessarily through any other marketing means. So there's been a heavy emphasis on that. And our large urban directors have been in touch with TACE directly to deliver those types of social media campaigns to draw folks in from out of state as well as in state.
So that was the one we last looked at, and they placed, since we have it up over 400
Yes.
special ed staff were placed through this particular system.
Just a quick question,
Yeah.
because we don't always have the commissioner here and, it's a broader question, but it's on the recruiting piece. What does it take to establish an alternative program, to become certified? What I'm thinking about is, like CREC has that program for cross certification. It's the only one I know of in the state. And when I know I talk about Bridgeport a lot, but when I was in Bridgeport, I was able to get lots of, not lots, but some teachers cross-certified in special ed. I paid the cost. They went to the program. CREC created a cohort. And, it was a way to get 5 or 6 more teachers a year that were special ed certified. Now, at the same time, I did check with the local university. I think I paid $6,000 a teacher for the art program with CREC. It really wasn't art, it was cross certification, but the local university wanted $24,000. So I'm just wondering how we could work that, because I've been pushing for years to say, why can't higher ed do some of that work at a more reasonable cost? It might be something that we could bring forward from here as well.
No, absolutely. And at some point, you should bring in Dr. Tucker along. That's an area that Deputy Commissioner will also be overseeing as well. Because some of the funding, I don't know what ended up, I have to think about what was in the budget, we were thinking about cross certification, special ed. As being an area that we could resource and we could fund. We talked to educators, that's an interest as well, but also talked about the cost. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. How do we do that? And the Alliance District set aside funds, which now got fixed in this legislation, for them to be able to use some of their fundings or directed some of their fundings in this recruitment and retention efforts as well, I think will help.
That will help. I just think that getting a cohort together in a district makes a difference. Do you know what I mean? It makes it easier for them to go, and Sonia Kunkel did it at the time. I think it was, but she's not, I don't know if she's that quick.
She's not, we still do it for districts, and I think one of the challenges, I think it's positive in terms of cross endorsing people with special ed, but now it's creating goals that are difficult to fill on the other end. You could have had any number of elementary teacher applicants, when you would get 100 applicants for an elementary school position, and it just doesn't happen anymore. And so I do think it can help, but I think there's still a pipeline of people that we're then bringing in special ed. And I know, having talked to somebody in a district where it was offered, basically it was, if you took the district up on the cross endorsement, there was a kind of an unspoken requirement that you were then going to be DSAP placed into a special ed position, whereas having the knowledge would benefit any teacher doing it. But the districts are doing it in order to put people in seats because they're desperate to do that. But also having like any teacher having a cross endorsement special ed. Where I went to college, when you went to I went to PC, and there was a requirement that if you got endorsed for elementary, you also had to get cross endorsed. You couldn't get one without the other. And I think cross endorsement pathways, particularly at the elementary school level, are something we can think about.
Can you talk about DSAP and special education? Is there a relationship between the two?
I mean,
normally durational shortage, people come in as general ed. Right?
I don't know, understand that. Is the, what do you, I don't understand the question.
The question is, one of the pipelines now
Yep.
is the racial shortage.
Yep.
Is that at all useful for filling special education slots, or is that generally just useful for filling general education slots?
No, I think it's used very frequently for special education as long as they have the 12 credits. I think one of the things we may have talked about actually at the last working group meeting is that we're bringing people into these. So take Central as the example, 39 people are working under a DSAP. And so we're taking people who have 12 credits and have not finished the rest of their program. We're placing them in challenging classrooms without necessarily the training or the support. And when we think about burnout, when we think about why are people choosing not to stay in the profession, I think those are some of the things we have to give consideration to when we have somebody working under a DSAP or as a long-term sub. How do we backfill that support so that we're setting those teachers up to succeed, not just meeting the need of having
Somebody in the room.
somebody in the room.
Yeah, I have a DSAP teacher and that support is really critical. I think there's so many factors, the complexity of the kids, the classes that she hasn't taken yet, are really important. That comes from that support, right? And so it's really, we need twice a week at least, at a minimum.
And I think DSAP has become critical to the special ed pipeline.
Yes.
It's like, oh, you have somebody who's interested, you get them the 12 credits, you get them into a classroom. But if that support's not there on the other side, it could very quickly have a teacher get disillusioned by the experience. I have to go with.
So Fran, this is Stephanie Wanzer. I'm a special ed teacher. I was a DSAP. The way I was in the classroom, I was a paraprofessional first before becoming a teacher. So I had that support from CES. I had the knowledge because I had worked there for many years. I don't think we're actually accessing or giving the ability to the schools to use them still. I know the teacher residency program has started a special ed component, which is fabulous. And I've spoken about that many times here. But I don't think, again, we got to go back. Why are people going into that? It's what we're asking them to do is that they have to have a degree. And a lot of people who are in those classrooms do not have degrees. So there's a part that we're pushing away that we might be able to access if we really look at those special ed fields and maybe the RESCs, get more information from the RESCs.
And so I'll add that in the bigger picture, so bigger, but I think it influenced the work that you're doing as well. We've done for the past 2 years, it was really looking at teacher evaluation, educator evaluation. Coming up very soon on the heels of that is looking at certification. So there will be a similar group convened to do the hard work since 1998 or regulations are here have not been refreshed or looked at. And so that there'll be a similar group, maybe some of the same players in the room to take a look at or certification in the state and have that hard conversation about where do we go from here. So all of these, I think it's really, that's a part of that conversation that will be happening.
Just to piggyback on that, Commissioner, I think as we think about the teacher residency program that has started as an elementary school certification program throughout the state now to attract teachers of color into classrooms, they're doing a pilot with special education this year. So this is the first year it'll be bringing some people into that cohort. And I think, looking at certification and how do people come to certification is going to be really helpful in that, because taking a residency model where somebody can actually come in and train appropriately and be able to obtain certification as long as they have their bachelor's degree, I think can be a huge asset to the field as long as we have the support for those teachers.
And with that, I'm going to answer you. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your
But
time.
thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
It's really great.
You got the three slides of Ryan's presentation.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
Hmm?
Should I see you?
Oh,
I'll look at the agenda. I'll look at the agenda tomorrow. I don't think so.
Yeah. Oh,
I think at the Army, where when there's shortages, they reduce standards. And when there are shortages, they raise standards.
The Army, you said?
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky in this thing.
And
Right.
I feel that it's supposed,
I'm sorry?
and then you feel that it's supposed.
Yeah.
Yeah, point taken.
Hey, hey, Brian, question, Stephanie again from CEA. How do you show, where's the accountability for the funding that you have on the screen? Like, how do the districts then come back and say, we use blah, blah, blah? How do they do that? And are you getting that information? Because some of our schools, I'm not sure if they're really using it in the right ways and as what you have up here. I'm just wondering, what's the accountability? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie, for the question. So most of these allocations are through our electronic grant management system. So we have the ability to monitor the drawdown, and your point is a great one in that districts and schools receive a lot of funding all at once. And we know there's a cliff, and it's not easy to spend money effectively and efficiently in a short amount of time. So we're continuously communicating with districts through that system to ensure that they're aware of their timelines and ensure that the money is allocated as designed in their application. Also, there are audits at the local level that happen. So if you have a grant and said you were going to do ABC with the funds, through that local audit, they'll be looking at and comparing expenditures with the actual allocations. And that information is then sent back to us. So there's a two-factor, like a proactive, and then once the money is spent and allocated, there's mechanisms to ensure that it's spent appropriately. But the next slide shows the additional funding through the ARP IDA for federal dollars as well. So you can see, our message to the districts is just to make sure that they're spending old money before new, really be aware of when the funding expires, and to utilize those funds appropriately through the timelines. But over $27 million allocated to flow through to the LEAs, and almost 2.5 million for our 3 to 5 population within the school district range.
These are Connecticut numbers.
Connecticut, yes.
Are you seeing that it is being spent by the timelines? and
It is, but we're
appropriately?
nervous about it. I mean, I think everyone's a little bit anxious,
I
and
am,
thankfully the federal government has, has expanded some of those
Yep,
timelines,
yep.
because I think they're seeing it across not only in Connecticut, but across the country.
Well, that's the big issue, is whether
Yeah.
the September 30th, 24 timelines can be expanded.
Right.
And that, it hasn't been yet.
But no one wants to return funds
No.
because we need to use every penny. So that's been the message, and we'll continue to work through that best as we can.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with districts just on ESSER money in general, but not
Mhm.
special ed
IDA.
in particular.
Yeah.
And I'm very worried
Yeah.
about, because having been at the state and return Title I money every year, I'm very aware that sometimes that money isn't spent. Districts may think they are, and I'm glad you're instituting a new way of accounting, the drawdown.
Based on
They have to
invoices.
spend the money before they get the money.
Yeah.
Which is good.
And that'll be an adjustment, but it's a positive one.
Yeah.
In that
Yeah.
sense of tracking, because in the past, districts can draw down the funds, but we don't know if they're actually
Yeah, they
being
don't know if they're actually
expended
spending.
until, it may be too
This
late.
is the difference, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I don't know that it's within our jurisdiction, but I'm curious about what effect multi-year money might have. Use it or lose it in a single fiscal year, and may lead to some really bad decisions.
Mhm.
And,
districts try to make, I try to tell people this, it seems like a lot of money, and it seems like a lot of money going to challenge districts, the big cities and all of that. And yes, it is, but let's remember at the same time that during that time, from COVID, from 20 on, and prior to that, municipalities didn't always fund districts well, or they funded them at the same level or 1% when inflation was so much higher than that. So I tell people all the time, make no bones about it, guys. A lot of this ESSER dollar money that looked extra is going into maintaining the operating budget. And I know that, people get angry at me and they say, no, we have plans, and, I had that conversation with state people, and I said, I know you have plans, But the plans for paying for psychologists or social workers, they're actually paying for the ones that are in the operating budget to begin with, to not lose them. And I know that that's happening, and I explained that a couple of weeks ago with Kate Diaz to the governor, that the ECS dollars as well go to the municipality, don't necessarily make it down to the classroom level. And I think I'd love to have a discussion with people around that, because I'm just seeing it. I mean, I'm familiar with Bridgeport, but I know that a lot of that went into operating. It's just important to keep that in mind, because people look at all this extra money and say, well, how come?
It cuts both ways, because I think governments, and the federal government is, I think, guilty of this more often than perhaps the state. But they want to provide flexibility in terms of how you can spend the money. But with that comes the assumption that if you make money available to districts, that they're going to know what to do with it, right? Yeah.
So my thing is, and I tell everyone all the time, I don't care, as a former superintendent, put parameters on the money.
Yeah.
It makes sense, because if you put parameters on, I can go to the mayor and say, I'm sorry, that money is for this, and we can't use it. So if you're not gonna lose 100 staff members, you need to fund us.
Yeah.
And the governor said, well, I'd like to do that with ECS money. And I said, well, it's too short a time right now. You're not gonna be able to. I don't know if you could do it in the future, but to me, just sending money without parameters makes no sense.
So continuing on with funding, a couple more slides. If you want to advance the next slide. This is just some details around the resource equity stipend. I think we pretty much covered this in the previous, but you can just see the total allocation around the resource equity for special education training and support, as well as paraeducator training. We had, in some circumstances, there's time and capacity to even fill out the applications and complete them. We try to make them as straightforward and as simplified as possible to ensure that the districts are able to access those. The next slide talks about the Connecticut CT SEDS implementation stipend, where we allocated funds to districts to assist with the implementation. Again, really creative ways. Most of the funds went either directly to teachers and or clerical staff and administrators for the additional time that went into training and support. And so we also expanded that to include funding for our private special education programs, charters, and RESCs as well. The next slide was a request from the committee or the task force around percentages of school districts. I do have an Excel sheet to send to everyone, but the numbers are just being double checked to make sure that they're accurate. But talking about this, you had asked about what percentage of the local budget is contributing to special education. You can see our statewide numbers here and the increase from 2021 to the following year, and we're just about at 25% as an average. The figures here include charter schools and LEAs, as well as the RESCs. Obviously, the RESCs have a very high percentage devoted to special education, so that is factored in here.
And I'm sure you have outliers on either end.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, how does that compare to other states?
That's an interesting question. I'd have to do some research into that to
You
see,
just wonder.
to see where other
And
states
whether
are
they
with
come
that.
split funding the same way we do.
Mhm.
Definitional issues, they have a large part of that. Have you gone back more than 2 years on that? I mean, it's been a growing trend.
We can go back. It's actually part of our performance profiles that we've done for districts in the past. So it's just a
It's
matter of
different, right?
pulling it.
It's aggregated.
It's
Be
aggregated.
interesting.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to do that, for a number of years to see whether, in fact, the proportion is growing over time. This would be lead, obviously, at 70-40.
Yeah, and I'd love that Excel sheet, and
Absolutely.
the reason I ask how we compare is that we had a presentation from Edunomics from Georgetown. And they were saying special ed education should be about 13–14%. And the district said, are you kidding me? And we've been over 20% forever. So I
Are we
just
talking about
wondered,
number of kids, or are we talking about dollars?
huh? No, the
Dollars.
percent of the budget.
Well, I mean, but if you, obviously, it costs more to educate a special ed kid than a regular ed kid. And so if you have a 15% eligibility rate, you're gonna have
Yeah,
a 25% figure there.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just would like to,
Yeah, we can look into
Yeah.
gathering information from other
Yeah.
states as well.
actually, Andy, you raised a good thing. If we could see that with the percent that they identify in other states.
Mhm.
Well,
You know,
that's available. That's online.
Preference rates, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
That would be really helpful.
Stephanie has a hand up.
There was also a chat about Camden eliminating positions because of budget cuts. And you know, I get the daily feed of all the education news in the state, and you know, every day.
It is.
There's no cuts, there's no
Growing,
cuts.
or the district fails to pass a budget.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
something like that, it's growing problem, we're hearing it more and more.
Stephanie, is that your hand raised for a new question?
Yeah, it was going back to the CT SEDS money. Just a quick question, Brian, are we gonna plan on having more of those meetings to make sure people are on the same page going forward into the next year? Because I know what I heard, a lot of people didn't understand where that money was going, for one. And what some of the things that I heard that were being used for didn't seem to be really what it was supposed to be used for. What would the accountability for that also be? So there's a couple of questions in there.
Yes, so we'll definitely continue to have conversations and to continue to meet into the second year of implementation. And the stipends, all the applications went either to reimburse teachers and educators or for training related purposes based on CT sets, so that there weren't any other identified usage of funding for those applications.
So would evaluations not being able to be done during the school year or in the school day, would that be part of that?
No,
Well, that's what I've heard it's been used for. So that might be another conversation we could have on the side. So I wanted to find out because I know.
yeah, it wouldn't have
not
been
being used the
approved.
way it was.
Yeah, we wouldn't have approved it. So if that's an outcome of what's happening thereafter, again, that would be something where in the auditing, there would be a.
Okay, yeah, because people are reaching out to me because of CEA. So I just wanted to put
Sure.
that. But it's just part when you had that slide, I needed to jump in. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I look forward to the continued collaboration and we talked about continuing the listening tours, both in person and online for our teachers and providers for next year. Just,
Well, on CT sets,
yeah,
is there any way we can pull out data or research to show that the non-use of drop-down menu actually improves special education? In terms of setting goals.
yeah, I mean, that's part of our
Yeah, that's
chart,
part
is
of
that right, that the IEPs that are generated from the system are of higher quality and are individualized, which is important. At the same time, we want to understand that we don't want our teachers and direct service providers spending time on paperwork and in programs. We want them in front of students to the extent that that's possible. So it's looking at the time necessary, to navigate the system and how that's
Yep.
improving over time. So the answer to your question is yes, we will be looking at quality. And actually, the next slide shows our IEP quality training, which is a focus on the content of those documents, not just the mechanism. And the commissioner was very vocal about this summer, providing in-person opportunities for teachers and educators to get together in the same place to work on their work. And we will be providing stipends over the summer. And so there's also a really great 5-minute overview video for parents that was put together with the support from AIR. And there's a link there if you wanted to take a look at that. And it's very general, high-level information for parents to help them understand the new document.
Brian, is the portal open for parents yet?
The parent portal is, yep, the system. So districts are utilizing the parent portal to disseminate information and documents within the system.
I know, because like for us, we have to still send everything paper home regardless, because they're saying, I mean, I was in PPTs that they're like, oh yeah, by the way, and this is the end of the school year, to tell the parents like, oh, this is going to be upcoming, not necessarily on. So I mean, that's another discrepancy where I'm still, sending paper back where they should all have the access to it.
That's right. Yeah, and not only is it for ease of sending documents within the system, but it also translates those documents in the top 10 languages in the state. So that's really a local decision or school-based decision not to access or utilize the portal. And so we've seen a little bit of that differentiation still in how districts are accessing that information.
Yeah, because the part with the different languages, I think is huge, because I would
It
have to
is.
put it back in and do it, and like, I'd have to go and do it, and I took Spanish in, high school, and I could do a little bit, but not that good.
No, this will save time and resources. And we do have data on the number of pages that have been translated in the system that I can share just as a, and into the different languages that have been accessed.
If I could jump in with a question.
Sure.
As a parent, it was a little difficult when we first jumped to this system. Is there any plans for some video training or something for parents to access in terms of using this new system?
There is, yeah, there's 3 resources. This is a great one. It's not about the system, but it is about the new IEP document. If you wanted to preview this link that I provided. We also have a 5-minute video that's an overview of the parent portal and a quick guide that's 2 pages for parents, and that's accessible in different languages as well. So I can share those 3 resources with you all to take a look at.
That's great. And I think if we can encourage districts to push that out to parents,
Yes.
that would be a huge asset for parents using the new system, because it was very, very difficult to use to begin with. I had to have a special ed teacher help me.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for the comment. All right, so moving on, there's some additional data here, and I do want to be cognizant of time too, and
Yeah,
we
I
can kind of
think
take,
we're gonna need to end with your
Sure.
presentation about 11:15.
Yeah.
Because we've got so we may have to continue it
sure,
into the next time we meet.
happy to do that,
Would that be all right?
sure.
Is that all right with you?
No,
Yeah.
So diving in a little bit into some more data that you had asked about, this is a snapshot of our environment, data for students that are included with their non-disabled peers over 79.1% of the time or greater. And you can see our numbers over time. We have seen a decrease in the amount of access our students had in the general education setting over time, but there was a bump up increasing that for 2021-22 data when we look at all disability categories. But it's interesting to see the breakouts, and for example, our population of students with intellectual disabilities, only 20% of students with intellectual disability as a primary disability category are included 80% of the time or more. So again, just food for thought. We have some really great conversations in our stakeholder groups when we set our targets for least restrictive environment. The next slide breaks out that same data by ethnic groups. So you can see by race and ethnicity, the breakdown between the first column talks about, and I know that's very hard to see on your page or on the screen, but 79% and above, 40 to 79%, 0 to 40, and then other private settings. That's something in particular that was an area of interest for this task force group, about the number of students in the disability categories for students placed outside of the public school setting. We don't have an issue with disproportionality when it comes to race ethnicity by LRE. We are required to post a relative risk index of 1.5 or higher. So for example, for the Asian population from 0 to 40%, you can see that number that says 1.98. That means if a student is of Asian descent, they're 1.98 times more likely to be segregated in that, not segregated, but in that type of setting for their time with non-disabled peers. I think it is also interesting to look at our students that are Black or African American. When you look at our country as a whole, students that are Black or African American are disproportionately placed out of school districts. They have a higher percentage of students that are placed. And in Connecticut, you can see only 14% of students of that race and ethnicity are included in the general ed setting, 79% and above. So this is a really good snapshot for us to consider as we're thinking about placement and access to highly qualified educators and instruction. The next couple of slides, so the next slide is just a link, which is a really great resource that OSA puts out. It's called Fast Facts, and it's an interactive mechanism for you to look at how Connecticut compares to other states.
Somebody's gonna have to email the slide deck to all of us so we can use this.
Yeah, well, I sent it out electronically so folks can have it as well.
So the whole.
This morning,
So
just
just Dawn, did you send it to everybody?
no, just to Dawn for now. So we'll have to make sure that everybody has a copy.
Yeah,
Access.
yes. We'll make sure of that.
Okay.
I have one question, I'm sorry.
Sure.
On this special ed service delivery.
Yes.
You know, having lived through DJ when I was
Right.
at the State Department,
Having litigated.
yeah. Let me ask you, do you monitor or deal with the districts that are outliers?
So we do factor that in. I mentioned earlier that our LEA determinations were only based on compliance factors.
Yeah.
So indicator 5 isn't factored into a determination for a district. Having said that, we do review the data on a yearly basis, and we have a lot of pans on the stove for inclusive activities, one of which is a partnership with Stetson. It's called Step by Step Training. So we've identified districts that are outliers or districts that are doing on the other end of the spectrum a really great job with inclusive activities and offer these types of trainings and supports to districts. So the difficulty with LRE is that the PPTs are making those determinations, and for very good reasons, students need more additional supports outside of the general education setting at times within their education. So a couple slides further, you'll see that Connecticut is across the country has the highest percentage of outplaced students as compared to any other state. Now, part of the reason for that is because we have 92 approved special education private programs, whereas you look at other parts of the country that may not have any or very few. But it's something to take a look at. And as you mentioned, Karen, the additional referrals that approved private special education programs are receiving, plus the staffing impact on those referrals as well is another factor. But this slide is on that link that I shared with you. This is the 80% and above, where Connecticut is right in the, comparable to other states where 67%, just over 67% are included 80% or more of the time. The next slide shows the information about separate settings. So this does include students in correctional facilities that are hospitalized or placed in a private special education program. But you can see our 6.82% there is well above the country as far as the average.
And this is outplaced through IEPs.
That's right.
Does not
Not include parentally placed.
Yeah, which is a substantial number.
Yes. Yeah. So,
And
Again,
none of
something for-
and none of this includes private school placements, right? either the numerator.
Students
or-
that attend, like, for example, a Catholic.
Or, yeah,
Yeah,
Catholic high
Yeah,
school,
it does not. Right, because those students wouldn't be reported by the districts.
and it doesn't include homeschools.
Doesn't,
Those would all be interesting numbers to take a look at. I assume Connecticut's in the lead on all of those across the country.
yeah, it'd be interesting to see, and, we do collect information for students that are homebound or, have medical needs that preclude them from being in schools. Those students are included in these data. So these are all graphics from that site where you can hover over and click into that are very interactive, and I can continue to bring information to the committee and the task force as well. The next slide breaks down, as I mentioned, students who are Black, African American, or Asian, and the higher percentage of outplacements for that population of student, along with Connecticut's figures. And then finally, maybe a good place to stop there would be the next slide that is a breakout of the disability categories and placement. So again, it's a little bit neater on the site where if you hover over a certain section, it cleans up the graph a little bit so you don't see everything all at once. But probably to no one's surprise, students with emotional disability are the highest proportion of students that are in different settings.
What's the source of this chart?
This is national data from all of the states that report to OSA.
Because it doesn't include parental placed.
This chart does, yes, so the light green would be separate school. And then the blue, I guess the darker blue is a separate category for private placement, which you were asking about before.
This is not Connecticut though,
This
right?
is the nation. Yeah.
Okay, and how does Connecticut?
We're comparable, our numbers are comparable as far, when you look at the disability category breakouts and the reason for placement out with emotional disability, followed by autism and.
And Brian, the parentally placed in private school, those are kids.
Yeah.
Is that I put my kid in private school and pay tuition, or is this settlement agreement parentally placed, or a combination of both?
So I will have to check on OSIP's, but we have information on our table 7. We have information about both
Got it.
that are a result of the mediated agreements. So that's another handout for a different time.
Huh?
I sent you a text.
Okay.
So I can save the remainder of the slides for next time.
Brian, that's the latest year that's available. I
Yes,
imagine.
2021. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder when the year clock. That brushed clothing.
Yeah.
I wonder what the data looks like for,
Mhm.
and it'll be interesting to see, as we start to come out of, physically come out of the COVID, not that the ripple effects are still around, but if that changes in any substantial way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the 21-22 school year data is suspect in a lot of ways because everybody wasn't in full time, full year and all that. I think the 22-23 data is pretty much normal data.
Well, you'll see too, I know you had asked, sorry, Karen.
No, I was gonna say 21, 22. Most people were in school. weren't
Most were, but
Yeah.
not the beginning of the year.
Yeah, there were some districts that, there was variability, but for the most part, there was a push for in-person,
Yeah.
especially for students with high needs.
Right.
But you'll see, you had asked about gap analysis and achievement. So when we have a little more time to talk about that, I can highlight the impact of COVID where actually our gap in achievement was compared to the statewide assessment decreased significantly. Not because of the students with IEPs that are achieving higher, it was because the population dropped because of the COVID impact.
Right.
So instead of a 40% gap on our proficiency rates, it was a 30% gap.
But
So
that's
because
because,
students
yeah.
received, again, there was a priority for
But there
students with
are
IEPs.
two different pieces of data. One on proficiency rates,
No.
and the other one is growth rates.
Mhm.
And there's an enormous gap on growth rates. So,
Right, so we report on gaps between typical peers and students with IEPs, which is a brand new data collection from OSA. It used to be 6 data points we reported on, and now there are 24. Back to your question about how much time is taken in collections and reporting, but it's integrated, so it's not.
I'd like to spend more time on that next time.
Sure. We can also bring that information into the subcommittees as well.
Yeah.
It's helpful for folks to look at.
Services and, yeah. Well, Brian, I want to thank you, it's a tremendous amount of work and I know we asked you for a lot of information and, I feel like I'm getting to understand, the data a whole lot better. And I think what the commissioner said, is that a no issue that you try to solve, before you, make the recommendations. And I think data helps us to know what the issue is.
Well, something we ought to set up the higher memberships, the annual performance report. It's online, and filed by the state. But huge amounts of data in that.
Yeah. But getting that data and being able to integrate it and think about it, there's a lot of data in here. I'd like to integrate it and think it through and now correlates with regular.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, like you said, I mean, taking the task force and ensuring that we have some actionable items that, we can put into practice quickly.
Yeah, that we can
There's
present.
some work to be done on that.
that's.
I did share some dispute resolution data and the State Advisory Council for Special Education priorities I put in there as well, because one of the subcommittees that is on alternative options for dispute resolution. So looking at the call center, Rhode Island's call center actually reduced the need to access some of those formal processes. We may also want to talk about or look at IEP facilitation. That's something in the state that was,
I know it's tried.
it was attempted and not really implemented. And then, there's student-led planning and placement team meetings that also help. So there's some items there potentially that could help impact outcomes when we're talking about process and procedures. But, the complaint process is a 60-day timeline for reporting, and oftentimes parents call and need answers quickly and need solutions right away, and districts as well, so.
Yeah. So we'll come back to it next time, but I have a couple of things. That's what I texted Andy about. One of the things is, would there be an objection to, missing the July meeting and reconvening in August? Anybody? I just happen to be away. That'd be okay?
I might give,
So we don't have great attendance today, guys. We have a lot of people missing.
I might give some time too to unpack the legislation a bit too.
Yeah, I mean,
We're all gonna have memos on that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't know if we can even have any reports from the different committees, because Patrice is not here.
Well, she was online.
Yeah, she was.
Yes, I know.
But I think she left.
Patrice's committee made the decision not to meet since it was in the last days of the legislative session when most of us were preoccupied with education funding issues.
I get it. Okay, so you'll probably have a meeting before the August meeting, right?
We will, yes.
Okay. Okay,
And I would appreciate not having a July meeting because I will be in the Arctic and do not expect to have connectivity.
Well, that's a weak excuse, I think, right?
yeah,
there's no way.
that's in August.
No, that's July.
Okay, so we're not gonna have a July meeting, so I'll send that
Excellent.
out. Okay. Okay, services.
I can report out briefly on that. So we, Brian, Andy, and Fran, you were all there. So we met for our first meeting, and we had, it was myself, Tara, and Alicia that were able to attend. And we kind of went through the expectations of the working group, made some notes, broke down things into buckets. We shared the notes out, identified a few next steps of things that we wanted to get some more information on, then take some action on that. We plan to meet again on Tuesday for a virtual meeting. to kind of outline next steps over the summer, and we'll determine whether we have our July meeting or not, because we have backed it up to this meeting.
Okay, all right, wonderful.
But we will make sure it's not a caps if we do it.
I do think we have to look at what the legislation requires, especially the gifted and talented. And have somebody look at that. That could be the services group, I suppose. although you're
Or we may need a whole nother,
maybe a whole.
especially if we're getting 8 new members.
Yeah, you know, I'm anxious to see that legislation. I mean, I've seen some of it, the gifted and talented and the seclusion piece, but
And the observation piece and the
yeah,
DD piece.
okay.
Well, I think it passed twice. I think it passed both part of the bond legislation and separately as 1200, but and I don't know what you do with that when the legislature passes.
That happened in a few places this year. but
Yeah.
those are-
Well, as Chris Smith says, we've got some Frankenstein bills there. That's how obvious, because, you know, they're huge bills and then something said in one bill and taken back in another bill. So,
Well, there was some of that, some of that correction stuff, but what happened was, after the Republicans filibustering on the last day, there was an agreement in place, with certain things in the bond bill, to get it through. And then after that happened, sort of the floodgates opened and a whole bunch of bills came through on consent.
Hedging bets and like.
I think the language is learned, there's one provision that wasn't in one, but there wasn't the other, but I think that's largely consistent.
okay, eligibility,
Our didn't meet
you did
the
not
last
like.
meeting.
So Amy Turner is taking that over because Kathy Gabrielson is unable to, she's going to be the alternative. I haven't heard from her. I'll be in touch with her. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody, as Andy does for today.
Now, I think we've got to move forward on really narrowing down what we're looking at. There's just
Yeah.
way too much here we could be doing and gonna be looking to the working groups to make those suggestions on what we actually can tackle. In that regard, we also want to be looking at all these other task forces, commissions, working groups, created by the legislature. And see whether, you ought to be leaving it to somebody else to deal with that area. I mean, certainly, discipline is an area which is lots of, let's go collaborative with the JGPOC. or suspensions. The funding one, I don't know what this Bergen Commission is all about, but that certainly looks like it's dealing with funding there. Who knows?
What's the current deadline for recommendation?
We have an interim report in February, and then a final report a year later.
And I think we're out in 25, aren't we? Out to 25.
That's a year later.
Yeah.
February 25, January 20.
Okay, so let me just see, the August meeting.
At which point, both you and I should be retired.
The August meeting is August 8th. Okay. So
Thank you for your hospitality.
Yes.
what?
Thank you for your hospitality.
Oh, always. Please help yourself to anything before you leave and, thank you for being here. Because I know it's a crazy time of the year for everybody. Bye,
Take care,
everyone.
folks.
Patrice, thanks.
Have a good July.
Have a good trip.
Coming from Virginia.
Yep, I'm gonna go down to Colonial Williamsburg tomorrow, so
Oh,
I'll
good.
visit again while I can.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And thank
We
you.
were supposed to have a meeting last Thursday and you never reached us, and I was at town.
Yeah, I went on, but no one was.
Oh, I appreciate it, John, it's just